Everyone in the world has gone to bed one night or another with fear or pain or loss. And yet each of us has awakened, arisen, somehow made our ablution, seen other human beings, and said, "Morning, how are you?"
Hi, namaste. Good morning. Hola.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just because I laugh. As if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words. You can cut me with your lies. You can kill me with your hatefulness. But just like life, I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain, I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. I rise. We rise.
Goodness, feed me. Goodness, feed me. Goodness, feed me. Goodness, feed me. Take me home.
Good morning, everyone, excellencies, colleagues. Good afternoon. And for our friends farther east and farther west, good night. And again, good morning. I'm very, very honored to be here with you. Happy World Food Day. I'm Sara Roversi. I'm the founder and director of the Future Food Institute, and I'm very honored to serve as your moderator for this Middle Eastern celebration of this very special day. This very special day is, of course, co-hosted by the United Nations and the United Arab Emirates. This is a very unique World Food Day because literally we are celebrating with the 24-hour relay around the globe. Earlier today, very early for us in Italy, we started the celebration kicking off the journey with the president of Fiji. And our colleagues in India have just passed the baton to us in the UAE. And then we're going to hand over to our friends in Ethiopia, really flying all around until tonight. The reason this is such a special World Food Day is because it's also the introduction of the United Nations Food Systems Summit. And this is a special time in history because in September next year, the world leaders and hundreds of thousands of people will convene at the summit to commit to transform the way we produce food, we consume food, we distribute food, because we need to fix food systems everywhere. Our goals are big ones, And of course, we want to end hunger everywhere. We want to create jobs. We want to, of course, reduce the climate change and all the environmental impact of our industry. And we want to make people healthier and happier everywhere. From now until then, the United Nations will support countries to make this happen. And also with the supports of countries like the UAE, the United Nations are going to facilitate the world's really to start this huge global conversation. So we really think that this is an incredible time in history. And as a contribution to the process, today we are diving into the future of agriculture, looking how technology is reshaping the way we produce food and how technology can help us to solve and fix the system. The United Arab Emirates is not traditionally understood as a center of agriculture, but I always found a lot of inspirations, a lot of innovation, a lot of bright minds that are making things happen. It's one of the dearest and hottest country in the world and imports the most vast majority of its food. And yet, precisely in this reason, is also the cutting edge of agriculture technology, with the majority of the implication that, of course, we can understand from the broader Middle East and all the other countries that don't have access to fresh water. So we're very lucky today because we have an incredible group of speakers that, of course, are making this thing happen and are going to show us what they're doing to solve this issue. But now I think it's time to jump into the conversation, and I'm sure that I'm gonna stimulate the appetite to know more about this country. And I wanna leave the stage to Minister Almheiri. We are very, very honored today, and thank you so much for joining us. You took office in 2017, becoming one of the first ministers in the world. Was full-time job is to thinking about how and from where we get our food from. I think that this is a big challenge. And I think that, Minister, as we look the next years for the United Nations Food System Summit to make the difference in the world, I really want to learn from you what kind of technology, what kind of strategies you have on mind and you think we need to pursue to make these things happen.
Thank you so much, Sara. Thank you. Hello, everyone from near and far, and greetings from the United Arab Emirates. We are a small country in the Middle East, but we are a country with, as Sara says, great ambitions and big dreams. So thank you all for joining us today on this very exciting 24-hour global relay. And I want to shout out to the Food System Summit team and also the Food Future Institute for all their efforts in putting this together. So, ladies and gentlemen, just as air is a need for us and water is a need for us to live, food too is essential for our very existence. Food is not only a need that we need, but it's also something that connects us in so many different ways. Food is culture. And so this is the reason why we are all gathered here today to celebrate food on World Food Day. One of the most important days that we feel in the Food and Water Security Office is precisely this day. We want to use this day to reflect and to highlight our relationship with food and also the challenges and opportunities that humanity has surrounding this. So World Food Day, as you all know, this year has really taken on an even greater significance. I mean, 2020 has seen humanity face an unprecedented threat in the form of the COVID-19 pandemic. All of us have been affected. And as you can imagine, it really has also affected the movement of food to the people. So it is now more than ever that we must join hands and we must as nations come together and discuss and find ways to help each other to ramp up the creation of sustainable food systems. we need to ensure that no one goes hungry to bed by 2030, which is the United Nations goal for zero hunger by 2030. The United Arab Emirates, known as the UAE, is taking very significant steps and taking the subject very seriously. So I would like to take this opportunity, we've put together a few slides to just tell you a little bit about what we've done and what our ambitions are and what our big dreams are in the food security file. So if we could start the presentation, go to the next slide. So let me first start by explaining what is food security. Food security is when a country enables the citizens and residents that live in the country to have access to safe, sufficient, nutritious food for an active and healthy lifestyle at affordable prices at all times, including emergencies and crises. Next slide, please. Now, what are the global issues that we have? Why are we thinking of food security? So we know that the population is growing, and by 2050, there will be 10 billion people. We know that climate change is affecting the way food is being grown. Farmers are finding it more and more difficult to grow for the needs of the population growth. Water depletion, us as the UAE, we are a water scarce country. We really have to think of how we can grow food without depleting our very precious water resource. And then of course there's food loss and food waste, and this is all about our behavior around food. If we really look at how our habits around food, what we buy, how we prepare food, what we put in the bin, this really plays a huge role on our food systems. Next slide, please. So I often talk about we need to disrupt systems. One system we need to disrupt is the way we produce food, but another system we need to disrupt is how we consume food. So this is all about our habits at home. Next slide, please. So we as the UAE have been through several crises in the past, and one, let's say quite a food crisis that we went through was about 10 years ago. And we had so many lessons learned through that crisis, and many steps have been taken. And what we're very blessed with in the UAE is the foresight of our leadership. So our leadership understand what are the global challenges, what are the future challenges, how we need to build resiliency. And so I am the first minister to be appointed for food security in the UAE. And in 2017, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, our Vice President, Prime Minister and ruler of Dubai, he said to me, Mariam, I need you to make a plan. I need us to adopt technology, and I need us to advance research and development. So already in 2017, the leadership really understood that they needed a minister to be accountable and to be responsible for the food security umbrella of the country. Next slide, please. So we started off with the plan. Next slide, please. So we got together with all the stakeholders in the country, and we developed in 8 months, we developed a nation, a country plan for food security. So these are the 5 strategic directions of the plan. So to facilitate agribusiness, as many of you know, the UAE is a hub for global food trade. We have a huge volume of food coming into the country, and we serve not just our country with the 9 million people, but we actually serve a consumer market of 3 billion people because of our networks, because of our airlines, our marine infrastructure. Second, we're trying to really ramp up our domestic production using agriculture technology, or ag-tech. And this is something we're going to be talking a lot more about today. Reducing food loss and food waste is a strategic direction on its own. We do realize that this is something we need to take leapfrog steps in. As you all know, a third of, or actually more than a third of the food produced globally goes to waste. And the UAE has one of the highest rates of food waste per capita per year. And this is why we're giving this a strategic direction on its own. The 4th direction is about food safety and about improving nutritional intake. This is what are the tools that we give the community to make better choices when they're buying food, when they're choosing food, preparing food. So this is nudging the community to make healthier choices when it comes to food. Then the fifth strategic direction is something we're actually really using in the last few weeks. This is how we prepare ourselves for a crisis, because as I said before, food security is about making sure you have access of food for all, even in emergency and crisis. So here are all the programs that we have activated now to ensure that when there is a blockage or when food supply is not coming in on one end, that we have plan B ready. Next slide, please. As many of you may know, in any strategy, you've got the strategic directions and you have the enablers. The enablers basically cut across all the 5 strategic directions. We're talking about a governance model. When you have a car, you could have a beautiful car, but if you don't have a driver driving it, you cannot implement the strategy. So the governance model is basically our driver that's actually implementing the strategy. So we need to have the governance model, we need to have a research and development agenda, we need to have sound data to take any decisions, you need to know what your baseline is. Human capacity, extremely important. When you're thinking of all the sectors and the whole food supply chain, you need to think of the human capacity that you need to build in the country to make an economic sector of it, to ensure that these can be run by your future generations as well. And then number 5, it's about the food movement. It's changing our culture around food. This doesn't just happen by a campaign or something. It really, this takes a lot of time because you're trying to reverse some of the bad habits that we've developed and for example, eating a lot of the wrong foods and also wasting a lot of food. Next slide, please. So this is the Emirates Food Security Council was formed, and this is basically a platform of all the stakeholders who have something to do with food security, be it food safety, be it doing permits for allowing food to enter into the country. So all the stakeholders are in this council that I'm proud to head, and it is the primary council reference in the UAE for all food affairs. So we have developed the governance model to drive our strategy because His Highness always wants us to make sure that when we have a plan, we've got interim targets and we've got also long-term targets which we're working towards. Next slide, please. So adopting technology. What do I mean by that? How can a nation facilitate, or the government facilitate, adopting technology? It's really getting together with private sector stakeholders, academia, researchers, and trying to develop the right ecosystem to ensure we can adopt technology. I'm going to give you an example of a simple step that we did when we first started this. So we used something called the government accelerators, and this is basically a space at the Prime Minister's office, which we used. We basically invited a lot of stakeholders, so we had over 50 stakeholders. We discussed what are the challenges, what are the barriers of adopting technology? Why is the UAE not able to adopt technology at a faster pace than how it's adopting? So getting them together, putting down the challenges, we then had 100 days to overcome these challenges with all our stakeholders and come up with solutions. So the idea of this government accelerator is you go in with challenges and you come out with solutions. And His Highness gives you 100 days to do this. And we were very lucky, if we go to the next slide, that within these 100 days, he was there and he saw us launch initiatives, which are the solutions to the challenges we have. So if you go to the next slide, please. Here you see the 10 initiatives that we launched within these 100 days. We have come up with an Emirates Sustainable Agriculture label. This is a label that we're now using to basically label products and farms that are using sustainable systems. This is all part of the UAE's, let's say, steps to transform to more sustainable food systems. We also came up with the framework of agricultural finance, the agricultural loan guarantee. This is all part of having a funding mechanism and a funding support for the agtech sector. We also came up with the agtech building code. There was no agtech building code before, and which basically resulted in a very high capex cost when you wanted to build an agtech facility. But now with these codes in place, And this was also work done with the FAO, with all the relevant international organizations. We made sure we had the right codes. And now when someone wants to set up an agtech farm, these codes are available, which really decrease the capex cost somewhat up to 30%. So this was also a huge step. And unifying the agricultural license was another example. When someone wanted to set up an agtech facility, they had to apply for 3 or 4 licenses because they needed to make sure all their legal activities were encompassed within those licenses. But now we made sure that all these activities were under one license, again, decreasing capex cost and trying to facilitate agtech in the UAE. These are just some of the examples. Let's go to the next slide, please. So here is just an example of some of the, I will call them in general, these are your CEAs, your closed environment agriculture or controlled environment agriculture. So here are some examples: vertical farms, advanced robotics, aquaculture RAS systems. And it's amazing, after we really have like basically opened this new economic sector, we're really starting to see the private sector emerging with all these facilities. And believe it or not, I mean, the UAE being a water scarce country, having less than 5% arable land, we're now growing salmon, we're growing blueberries. It's really fascinating to see what technology does. And we really hope to advance this in a way to make sure that technology cost starts becoming less and less and less, which will then also help us to export this knowledge to other developing countries who can then use it. And it can basically be used in any climate. Next slide, please. So to support any technology development, you need to advance in research and development. One thing I always say here is, what are the things we have in abundance here in the UAE, in a marginal environment like the UAE? I call them the 3 S's. We've got the sun, we've got the sea, and we've got the sand. And then I often think of what are the foods that we could grow with the 3 S's. So when we think of things like algae or insect-based protein, cellular agriculture, these are all things that we really want to start pioneering in and really, let's say, raising the bar in. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Sarah. So here are just examples of some of the research and development facilities that the UAE has. We have a Seawater Innovation Center. This is basically it is exactly what I said. It's a system, a desert system that grows fish in seawater. The wastewater from that goes into halophyte plants, which are salt-loving plants. And these are salicornia. From the salicornia, you can make fuel. So you've got the fish as your protein, you've got the fuel from the halophytes, and then the water goes through a mangrove ecosystem and gets recirculated back to the fish. And it's all powered by the sun, and it's in the sand. So this is a great example of how you grow protein and fuel in a desert environment. And this has really been so successful that Etihad Airways, one of our national airlines, used a small percentage of this fuel to fuel a plane that went from Abu Dhabi to Amsterdam last year. We've also got the International Center for Biosalmon Agriculture, also known as ICBA. This is now a 20-year-old, or actually 21-year-old center that really focuses on what are the crops that you can grow in marginal environments. And we've got a speaker, Tarifa, who will be talking more about ICBA soon. The Marine Innovation Park, this is a center that we are currently under construction. It will be ready in a few months' time, so hopefully by 2021. And this center will be all about how we can really catalyze the blue economy in the UAE. So when you're talking about food security in the marine environment, aquaculture, algae, you name it, novel marine products. So this is somewhere where we're going to be inviting partners from around the world to come and do research and development in the marine environment. So we're really excited about that too. Next slide, please. And of course, for any research and development to really to catalyze, you need the funding. And the UAE has really taken steps in this, and Abu Dhabi in particular. ADIO has, or the Abu Dhabi Investment Office. We've also got a Salvatore who'll be speaking about this in the panel. They've put together a $272 million fund for really pushing research and development for food security. And just recently, $100 million was awarded to 4 global agtech companies who have set base in the UAE and who are really pushing the bar on how to develop CEAs, closed system farms in hot, arid climates like here in the UAE. Next slide, please. We go to the next slide. So I just want to show you a little bit of some of our smaller initiatives that we also have done in the last two years. So we've got the National Nutritional Guideline. This is something we did with the Ministry of Health. This is basically to give the community a guide on how they should be eating, what's a balanced meal look like, especially looking at our culture, our environment, what's available in our market. So this is a guideline for all the different age groups, and it gives just the community a reference they can use to improve their healthy diets. Next slide, please. We also developed the nutritional labeling policy. This is basically a traffic light system where on foods, I mean, not all of us are nutritionists, so it's very difficult to know, okay, if I see this level of sugar or this level of salt in a food, is this too high or too low? And this traffic light system makes it very easy for the consumer to quickly identify whether something has high salt, high sugar, high trans fats, or high calories. So just to warn them a little bit to make better choices as well. Next slide, please. The FoodTech Challenge was launched last year, and we'll be talking a little bit more about this and showing a video as well. So we really wanted to excite the youth and entrepreneurs and researchers around the world to really think of innovation and technology when it comes to food. And I'm not just talking about how we produce food, but also when we're talking about waste, when we're talking about transporting food. So really across the whole food supply chain, looking at what technologies and innovations could be put to use, could really be a game changer when it comes to more sustainable food systems. So this was launched with His Highness as well. Again, I can only accentuate, and you see him often in the pictures, the political will is so important. When the leadership is with you every step of the way, supporting you in the vision and the achievement and a national priority, it really helps the whole country push towards that direction. It gets everybody wanting to be involved because they see that the leadership is absolutely interested and behind our backs with this. So the FoodTech Challenge has been launched. We had so many, I think it was over 400 different ideas that were qualified, and we now have the finalists, and the award ceremony will take place on the 17th and 18th of November. So we invite you all to attend. It's a virtual event, so we'll be talking a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Next slide. The Food Research Platform, again, this is to try and get the people, or let's say the institutes and researchers, to communicate a little bit more and to diffuse the work that they were doing all in silos. So every university was doing their own research, every research institute was doing their own research. So this platform was developed to get them all to know what the others are doing, so that there's no duplication. And we're really trying to, as I said before, create that ecosystem to try and build up the research when it comes to food systems. Next slide, please. The UAE Aquacultural Pulse was something we also came up with, trying to grow this aquaculture sector in a sustainable way, showcase to people around the world who want to maybe come and invest in aquaculture. What are the species that the UAE consume? What are the prices? What are the hatcheries that are available? The farms that are available? So just some general knowledge to really help push ag tech when it comes to farming fish sustainably. Next slide, please. And along came COVID in March. And we suddenly saw all the planes grounded, which is a very strange feeling for us. As you all know, and as many of you probably use our national airlines to transit to other countries or to actually come and spend some time here, it really was so strange for us to see all the airplanes grounded. And as you can imagine, we have a huge volume of food coming in, so perishable items coming in by plane on a daily basis. So when COVID hit, it really was, we had to activate so many programs under the strategic direction of emergency and really make sure that the food kept flowing through the other plans that we had in place. So I have to say, during this period, first of all, I think people started to realize the importance of food security much more than they did before. Second, again, the leadership was behind us. They supported us in every way. I cannot thank them enough for all the support and all the efforts that they put behind the scenes. The private sector, brilliant. They did everything they could to try and source food from different places. And us as the government, we used the Emirates Food Security Council, which I had discussed before. And we got everyone together. We put some proactive measures in place. And it was fantastic that we already had a plan, that we already had the governance model ready. And we were able to, let's say, maneuver through the bottlenecks that happened. It was a real learning curve. And during this, you know, everyone says, okay, when a crisis happens, you've got opportunities and you've got new ideas that come up that maybe you hadn't thought of before. But one thing was clear: we needed to boost our domestic production using ag tech. This was something we saw. Our reliance on food and net food imports into the UAE, this heavy reliance, this is a risk for us. So we really have to take steps to say, how can we boost an ag tech sector to grow some more of our needs than we are growing now, and really try and also become a hub for technology and knowledge for hot, arid, marginal environments that have the same environments that we do. So these are really our ambitions. And these were some of the changes that happened. And if you see on the next slide, you'll see during the crisis, the cabinet said, we need to form an ag tech sector development team. And this team is made up of government representatives and also the private sector representatives to really help. Let's say, what are the interventions that the government needs to do to push this sector in a much more accelerated way? So this is just in a nutshell some of the, if we go to the next slide, this is just in a nutshell some of the, let's say, initiatives that we have done, some of the actions we've taken, what our ambitions are. And for us, it's all about making sure the UAE is, of course, a hub for food trade, because we are serving such a huge consumer market, being where we are with the infrastructure we have, but also to become a hub, again, for technology and knowledge. And our ambition and our vision is to be a world-leading hub in innovation-driven food security. So we strive for this transformation, and we cannot urge you enough to join this conversation. And even everybody as an individual, they have a role to play. If you really think about what you're buying, what you're putting in the bin, this is already impacting the food system that you're in. So if you can make it a policy at home to not waste any edible food, if you can make it a policy at home to say we will try and buy local, we will try and buy just the foods we need, or if there is any leftovers, we use it for another purpose. These are small things you can start in the household level. And believe me, it makes a huge impact. So thank you again to everyone that has organized this. We invite you to the award ceremony of the FoodTech Challenge. We'll be showing a video in a few minutes about it. It's on the 17th and 18th of November. So please come on board. We're extremely excited for next year's Food Systems Summit. For us, this is a pivotal platform that we're going to be using to accelerate the paths to achieve the goals we want to achieve by 2030. And I cannot accentuate more to say we must shift in the way our food systems are. We must have a paradigm shift. And I said these words yesterday as well in the Committee on World Food Security, where we were talking to a lot of thought leaders about how we can transform our food systems. This paradigm shift is so necessary because it is not right that 690 million people are going hungry to bed, yet there's so much food being wasted. We all have a role to play. There's a lot to do. And thank you again for being here. And we've got a lineup of really great speakers and some insights on some of our farms in the UAE who are already using AgTech. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, for setting the scene so well. I think we're gonna broadcast the video at the end of the session and here, yeah. So thank you so much. So I think that your message was really the perfect transition to the next segment of today's events. We're actually, as you said, we invited experts. We invited experts that are actually our food heroes. And as we head to the summit, we will need a strong sense of what technologies and policy works and which one do not. And overall, what we need to change the direction, to course correct. And we'll therefore be asking a series of questions to our panelists, our guests, to highlight which are the outcomes, which are the good actions that are already there. And so I think that they can give us tons of groundbreaking best practices that we can definitely share with the entire world. And by the way, I'm remembering to everyone to sign up to become a food system hero, like the ones that are representing today the UAE. So now I want to introduce you who are our guests today. The first one is Salvatore Lavallo, head of the Foreign Direct Investment at Abu Dhabi Investment Office, which has been responsible for some very big and very exciting investment in high-tech agriculture. Then we're going to have Dr. Tariva. She was with us also during World Earth Day. So she is the Deputy Director of the International Center for Biosaline Agriculture in Dubai, one of the top research institutes in the world for this kind of agriculture. And she's very focused on growing in harsh environments. That is so much needed because everywhere in the world, also in our dear Mediterranean, we are going to face desertification in the far future. Then we're going to have Stephen Ritz. My friend Stephen Ritz is one of the most famous teachers in the world. He's an educator. He is an urban farmer, but actually he is growing kids, not only plants. So I think it's going to be very inspiring to hear what he's doing in schools. And then we're going to have Hemant, co-founder and CEO of Vegitech, an hydroponic startup that is focused on harsh food production environments. So I would love actually to start with Hemant, because we are entering now, let's say, a set of very good insights from the minister. We get so many insights from what the UAE is doing. I think that now is the time really to show also what the community is representing. And I want to start with you, Hemant. So since Vegitech is also trying to disrupt the food production industry, and could you weigh this on this point? I think it's interesting to know, how does Vegitech meet health, affordability, and the sustainability challenge that are the biggest challenges we are facing now?
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Your Excellency, for again inspiring us. Every time we actually get to have a session with Her Excellency, she leaves us with so many inspiring thoughts, and every time there's something new coming to the table. So really pleased, to be here today. My name is Hemant Julka. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Vegitech. The three key things which you spoke about, I'll start with sustainability, Sara. So very, very important to understand that we're in a country where temperature, soil, and water are not very conducive for agriculture. So very important to kind of make sure that we are able to provide 12-month production of crops. So that's the first pillar that we have taken, where we have brought technology to grow crops for 12 months. When you look at the economical implication of this is adding 45% to the agriculture related GDP of the country. So very important from an economic sustainability to provide that element in there. The second element essentially is using LED assisted hydroponics and protected hydroponics. We are looking at conserving 90% to 95% of water. And water, as you know, is a very scarce resource in desert conditions. So this is where we are being very, very careful about the way we use water in our farms. The third thing essentially is about the soil part. So everybody knows in desert conditions, we really don't have a topsoil. So we have gone to the space where we are doing soilless agriculture, where we do active hydroponics and passive hydroponics, where we are using grow media that is not soil. And that enables us to not use pesticides. And by design, we create pesticide-free crops. So this has a huge implication on the sustainability of the health of the nation itself. So this is how we are kind of looking at sustainability. And any person from an agroeconomics perspective will tell you that the cost of growing is directly proportional to the inputs that you bring in. So if you're kind of reducing your inputs on your water, your soil, and your nutrition, then you are able to kind of compete on the affordability angle for the crops that come out of your farm. So for the perishable products, the perishable crops that come through, we are very, very competitive. So it's not that because we introduce technology, we are raising the prices of the commodities. So we are very careful about that part. And because we have our own design and research development labs, we are able to manage the entire technology stack that we bring to the table. So affordability is a very, very important aspect, but we make sure that in the perishable crop space, we are very competitive to what's happening in the market. There are particular areas like fruits and grains where we are doing a lot of active research, and we are working very closely with the Food and Water Security Office to try and bring in technologies that can at scale provide us affordability in the marketplaces. So this is the active work that's actually happening. And again, Dr. Tarifa is also doing a lot of work in that space. I'm sure she will be kind of talking about that, where we are trying to look at wheat, rice, maize to be grown in the lands of UAE itself. The third angle which we spoke about essentially is around, so we covered sustainability, we've kind of covered affordability. The third one essentially is around health. So as VeggieTech, we want to really change the perception of the modern day farmer. It's not only important to kind of grow the crops that the society needs, but we need to make sure that we bring the right amount of nutrition to the society itself. So currently we are doing a lot of work with the university ecosystem locally as well as globally, where we are looking at the three main issues of the health of UAE. Type 2 diabetes, we've got basically childhood obesity, and third essentially is cancer. This year we are tackling type 2 diabetes and childhood obesity by trying to figure out what is the nutrition that is required for the citizens and the residents of the country so that we can delay the onset of these typical issues, and how can the farmer bring that nutrition value to the society. So there's a lot of active work which is happening in this space, where hopefully we'll be able to kind of bring some radical solutions which will actually assist the nation, the health of the nation to actually become a lot more robust.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And as you mentioned, Dr. Tarifa, I think the best thing to do now is to turn to the next, Dr. Tarifa. At your research center, you look at how grow to food actually in some very, very, very challenging environments. And we want to know which are the technologies you're using to achieve that and what you can share with us, because the challenge you're facing can inspire many more people around the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, to start with is with the marginal environment. Again, rightly said, why marginal environment? Just because they are suffering from different bio and physical constraints that it just doesn't enable plants to grow, and it affects the life on land. We have about 1.75 billion people living in marginal environments, of which 820 of them, millions, usually they suffer from undernourished. So that's why we need to focus also on the type of crops that we need to grow there. So to start with, we were thinking of smart crops. Researchers started to think about what's the best crops to grow in such environment. So the technology is really, first of all, based on the breeding and trying to know and understand the genomics associated with those crops, in order to ensure that the breeding will give us hybrid crops that will be suitable for those environment. So we were speaking about, for example, quinoa. Quinoa is very nutritious and it can really grow on this land. And it's very important to ensure about the quality also of the nutritious factor available on those crops to ensure the healthy food system available on these lands. One of the other thing is the aqua agriculture system is again, those areas suffer from high salinity, scarcity of water. So we need to look at the unconventional water. How can we really try to use the rejected water from the desalination to ensure that we can grow crops that are halophytic. They love the salinity and they are nutritious at the same time. And therefore we are talking about saliconia, which is really delicious. I myself tried the saliconia smoothies and saliconia burger. It took me a while to believe that, but see it to believe it. And it's there and it's really happening, and it does have an alternative values for the food system. When it comes to water, Hemant mentioned it rightly. I mean, again, we've got to be careful about how do we utilize water. So the technologies used is really smart technologies in order for us to ensure that we keep crop calculator, how much each crop consume water, so we don't over irrigate. Because again, in the case of the UAE, for example, we found out that people over irrigate dates palm. It doesn't need that much of water. There is a system where you can really use irrigation in the winter. It's different than when you will use it in the summer. So, I mean, all these technologies, again, were blended in a way where we can raise more awareness for the end users. Using sensors, for example, when it comes to the irrigation system, and ensure that there are smart technologies implemented. Big data are very important, especially when it comes to the climate modeling. We try to ensure that we have all those information to ensure that we create system for early drought monitoring system and detection system. And also, finally, drones, agri-drone are very important. And we use it for seeding, and we also use it to scan the land in order for us to produce salinity maps, which is very, very crucial and important for farmers to understand what type of soil and what type of land they are using and working with.
Thank you so much, Tarifa. We are clearly understanding that education and knowledge and science are crucial to solve these issues.
Absolutely.
And then actually, I want to jump from that to education. So I would love now to hear the voice of our friend Stephen Ritz that actually brought me last year to see one of the most amazing schools set up I ever see in the world. That was in the UAE, in Dubai. And I want you, Steve, to share with us what you're doing and what's your theory of change.
So, good morning, buongiorno, and assalamu alaikum all. It's a pleasure to see you. And Dr. Tarifa, I've so enjoyed visiting your facility. It's really a marvelous place that inspires me. And I think there's two things to talk about here. The notion of fertility and fertile soils. And the most fertile soil we have in the UAE is right under our hats. It's called our children's minds. Because if we move them forward, we literally grow something greater. You know, I couldn't help but hear Her Excellency talk about the traffic light system. And quite frankly, that's brilliant because we can use that in all forms of our behavior. But a color-coded system is really what it's all about. You know, I have a very elaborate presentation that I could jump to and share, but I think I'm going to really not do that today and rather focus on what the issue is. And the issue is simply this, and I'm looking at Hemant smile. When children grow plants, that changes everything because it creates a sense of nurture. It creates a sense of compassion. It creates a sense of empathy. And if COVID has taught us one thing, it is compassion is the new curriculum. And that's really where we need to be. Because when we teach children about compassion, we teach them about everything. We teach them about empathy. The most important thing, and Sara, you brought up the wonderful work that is happening across UAE, so many schools. I'm proud to work with ESOL Education at the Fairgreen International School and also Dunecrest American School. Two very distinct schools under one umbrella or one brand, if you will. But when you put health, wellness, and sustainability at the core of all that you are doing with children, that changes everything. Because as you saw with these little children, they love growing their plants. They love eating their plants. They understand that they need water for their plants instead of something that just comes out of the faucet that goes endlessly when they're brushing the teeth. So again, Her Excellency talked about so much, but it really talks about, I think what we really want to talk about is glocalization. And what I mean by glocalization are small systemic changes that become best procedures and best practices and best protocols that we can all do, that everyone can do. And for me, make no doubt about it, it starts in schools. And it starts in schools with wealthy children, because wealthy children create, are part of a culture that creates procedures and protocols and business opportunities, but that also goes back to their home countries where there are less wealthy children. And what do we know there? That the most important school supply in the world is food, especially if you don't have it. And what has COVID taught us? COVID has taught us that, guess what? The greatest immunity builder in the world is fresh fruits and vegetables, right? Having them in our home, surrounding them, surrounding us with it and surrounding children with it is the most critical thing we can do. I'm literally in the epicenter of the crisis here in the United States. And thank God, knock wood, I have not become ill, but I believe it's because of two things. Number one, I'm digging in the soil daily, so I'm exposed to all kinds of microbiomes. And most importantly, because I'm eating a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. And literally because of that, my immune system is as boosted as possible. So for me, it's all about children. It's all about schools. I think when you give a child a seed and you put a seed in that child's hand, you are making them a promise that they are going to see that seed come to fruition and have a crop of epic proportions. And what does the data show us? Years and years and years of data in both marginalized communities and wealthy communities tells us that children who have access to healthy, fresh food will eat it, that students who have access to a garden on average consume 47% more fresh fruits and vegetables than those who don't. And with every burger we take out of their belly and replace with a banana, a piece of fresh fruit, a piece of citrus, some locally grown berries, we are creating a health system that moves us from healthcare to self-care. And no matter where you're from, it's no longer about where you're born or your birthplace, it's about breakfast. We can alter our lineage by changing our lunch, and we can manifest our best DNA by eating a healthy dinner. And that's what this is all about for me. And it starts with children and it starts in schools.
Thank you so much, Stephen. So, innovators, technology, futuristic solutions, how we're gonna grow game changers. And now I wanna talk with someone who's investing in game-changing things, in game-changing ideas. So Salvatore, tell us, how do we ensure as, say, financial investors and so on, that we are investing in portfolios that are good for humans and good for the planet, that are creating prosperity in a good way?
Thanks so much, Sarah, and thank you, Your Excellency, Dr. and the other panelists. So at the Abu Dhabi Investment Office, we really help any company that is expanding to or growing in Abu Dhabi. And one of our key focuses has been on agriculture and agriculture technology and food security. And this is a great question because we're always looking not at just the return on investment, but what is the impact of these projects in the ecosystem more broadly. And I think what's, as Her Excellency said, it's a human problem. We have 25,000 farms in Abu Dhabi, 35,000, I believe, in the UAE. And so all of these technologies that we're talking about really affect not only all of us who are eating this food, but many, many people who are working on the farms. In the video that we saw before this session, it said there's 80% of family farmers around the world, and more than 50% of people get their food from self-sustainable farming. And so we have to look at what is this human impact. The way that we make sure that we're doing this when we are investing is by looking at the impact that these companies can have more broadly, not only in our own communities in Abu Dhabi, in the UAE, but how can the technologies that they are developing here be globally exported? How can we look at new ways of farming? How can we look at closed environment agriculture, indoor vertical farms, new cultivars like algae, as Her Excellency said. We're also even looking at how can we grow food potentially in space? How can we learn from all of these new technologies? But we also have to look at how can we transform all of these people in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi, all around the world that are currently farming, and how can we give them the technologies, give them the education, put the food in their bellies, like Stephen was saying, so that the children can then grow up to make more of this research and make more of this change, feed those 10 billion people that we're going to have in 2050. So I think the best answer to your question is that at the investment office, we always are looking not only at the return of investment on the money that the government is putting into these projects, but we're always looking at what is that impact on the ecosystem. And by that, we don't only mean Abu Dhabi or the UAE, but how can these solutions that are developed here create a hub that is globally exportable and globally impacting?
Thank you so much. And here you see the responsibility of a country, the responsibility as you and as an entrepreneur, because taking long-term decisions, it's crucial now, more than any time in history. So thank you so much. Excellencies, colleagues, we have many people following us on different social medias, commenting and cheering us, saying thank you for the inspiring thoughts and stories we are sharing with them. Now is time, let's say, to jump into the next session, but I think that this brings us to the end of the celebration of World Food Day in the Middle East. But it's certainly, I think it's probably is not, I'm sure is not the end of our engagement, because this is just the starting point of a long journey that is going to take us from now until the summit, the Food System Summit organized by the United Nations in 2021, when we know that many voices are going to be involved, and we know that we need the support of you as governments, of you as innovators, of you and the children's and your communities, the communities that you represent. So before we close, as the minister was mentioning, of course, we know that there's an important thing happening also next year in Dubai, and we're all excited. We all want to go there. And we know that also the World Expo in Dubai is going to be a place where we are going to talk about the future, about sustainability, about youth and empowering youth. So I don't come from Dubai, but I hope to be there with you. And I want to invite you all. I want to invite you all to check the website, see the big challenges they're launching, see how you can get engaged, and see what is going to happen next year. And not only see, take a flight and go there and be part of the conversation actively. So first of all, join the mission, candidate yourself to become one of the World Food System heroes. So check the website of the United Nations Food System Summits. Second, join the World Expo in Dubai in 2021 is going to be a very important year. And now, before we leave, I'm going to ask to my guys, the Francesco in the back of the house, to launch a first video about the FoodTech challenge. The time is short, so check and join the challenge. And second, a very inspiring video that is going to stimulate the appetite to take the flight and visit UAE. Thank you so much, Excellencies, to join us. And thank you so much to our food heroes to be with us today and celebrate World Food Day. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
our mission and vision in the UAE for food security is to ensure that all citizens and residents in the UAE have access to safe, nutritious, sufficient, and affordable food at all times.